What's up, Dragon Brood? So today we're going to be talking about Strixhaven previews. They had a ton that came out on Thursday, so I did a live stream right after that. We talked about all the cards coming out. We will be doing future videos as other previews come out, so don't worry about that. We will cover all the other cards. I just figured there was so much available on day one that it was worth actually doing a video for. So we did it on stream. I edited that stream down just to make it easily digestible. But we did cover a lot of cards. One of the things I do want to say is we are going to have different opinions about cards. That is totally okay. Just be civil in the comments. That's all I'm asking for. Like, everybody's going to view cards differently. And truthfully, until we see the entire set, there's a lot of assumptions we're making way out of context. So please do not read too much into these opinions either way. Many of these are kind of predicated on if the rest of the set includes X, or if there's more of this type of card to do this, right? There's a lot of that. So please, and that's not just me, from anybody, don't make too many decisions here on day 1, 2, or 3 from the previews, because a bunch of us are just making predictions on things we have no clue about. So just keep that in mind when watching the rest of the video. Otherwise, enjoy, and I'll see you in the comments. Yeah, so Professor Onyx, weirdly not called Liliana, but it is a legendary Planeswalker Liliana, so there's that. 6 mana, not great, not bad, is a 5 loyalty Planeswalker, which is also fine. Magecraft, we're going to see this on a lot of cards today, and if for whatever reason, it's kind of a different thing. It's not really prowess, because it triggers whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, but it's on a lot of cards. Not really prowess because it does more than just add +1/+1. So this is one of the times it makes sense that they actually, because I kind of have a gripe about reusing mechanics and renaming them, but in this case, it is actually functionally different. Jamie says, is that going to screw up when you search for Liliana? No, because the card is still a legendary Planeswalker Liliana. So that's fine. I'm not sure when you're going to search for a Liliana, but if you search for Liliana, it still searches. But her abilities +1. You lose 1 life. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put 1 of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. So a good just search tool for +1. So you'll basically start out with her at 6 if that's what you want. -3, each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures that player controls. I mostly don't mind this, but I do tend to have issues when cards don't give you the choice of what to kill. A lot of times it doesn't seem like that works the way we want it to. So I do have questions about that, but otherwise, seems all right. Seems all right. And then -8, each opponent may discard a card. If they don't, they lose 3 life. Repeat this process 6 more times. So at the point in the game where you're probably going to use this, your opponent's not likely to have 6 cards. So maybe they discard like 2 and then take 12, or lose 12 life, I guess, not even take 12. So, I mean, that's probably mostly good. I mean, just -8, deal at least 12. But I mean, as weird as it is, in current standards, you have some life gain decks that probably wouldn't even care. I mean, they could still survive that, maybe. So I don't know. It's kind of weird. But generally speaking, yeah, this should be an okay card. I think people. I think the issue is it does cost 6, but it does have a lot of loyalty. So I don't have a problem with that. Just one of those cards that I think if you're a big fan of Liliana, or you're going to be playing like the slower control type decks, this could be a better finisher than playing with the other Liliana that exists. Though that other Liliana does do like 3 a turn, which is a little bit different. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see what's up. Kyle, I don't know. Like, here's the thing. I think everybody wants to throw Vorinclex in a deck that has Planeswalkers, but it's not always the best card to have in there. Like, this is nice if you have a Vorinclex, but the rest of the deck may not facilitate having a Vorinclex. I put up a deck recently that had a couple of different Planeswalkers, but the Planeswalkers doing their ultimate thing right when you play them wasn't necessarily why you had them in the deck or what the purpose was. So Vorinclex turned out didn't actually work great in the deck, though it is an actual good card. So just a thing right now I see people doing, and I don't necessarily agree with. Plus, you also have to figure the fact that these are also all expensive cards. You're talking about adding a 6 alongside another 6, and that's not going to be necessarily easy to cast all of those. So just one of those things. Here we have Kasmina Enigma Sage. One colorless, a green and a blue. Each other planeswalker you control has the loyalty abilities of Kasmina Enigma Sage. So if you play any other planeswalkers alongside this, they also gain these abilities. So you have +2 Scry 1, which seems kind of okay. I mean, you're playing it for 3 mana, so if your opponent doesn't have a lot of threats on board, or just small stuff, you could play this on turn 3, move it up to 4 loyalty, should be able to get at least 2 activations off of it. -X, create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature, put X +1/+1 counters on it. So, if you want to do let's say you +4, then you could -3, or +2, so you bring her to 4 loyalty. Then you could -3 to make a 3/3. That seems reasonable. Then search your library for an instant or sorcery card that shares a color with this planeswalker. Exile that card, then shuffle. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. This is actually probably how a or 3 mana planeswalker should be built, right? It's got some useful abilities, it's got some fun stuff you can kind of see yourself working toward. A little gimmicky if you want to play it in a deck with 2 or 3 other different planeswalkers. But ultimately, doesn't have a crazy ultimate, not doing anything that's just going to blow your doors off. Zaffai, Thunder Conductor, 2 colorless, a blue and a red. Legendary creature, Human Shaman. It's a mythic rare. Magecraft, whenever you cast an instant, or cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, scry 1. If that spell's mana value is 5 or greater, you get to make a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature. If that spell's mana value is 10 or greater, then it deals 10 damage to an opponent chosen at random. Like, it's fine for a commander. Being able to pay 5, make a 4/4, I'm down with that. I think it'll get played. It's a different style for red and blue, so I'm behind it. I think it's pretty good. Willowdusk, Essence Seer, 1 colorless, 1 black, 1 green. Dryad Druid, legendary creature, mythic. Pay 1 and tap it. Choose another target creature, put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the amount of life you gained this turn or lost this turn. Whichever is greater, activate only as a sorcery. This card's pretty sweet. This card's sweet. I'm in on this card. It is low casting costs, sizable body, 3/3 for 3. It gets, you're likely going to be able to put at least 2 to 3 counters on this if you want to, because you can either gain life or lose life for your own abilities and still get to put counters on stuff. And if you have a deck that also cares about +1/+1 counters, also cool. So this actually fits a few different styles of decks. I'm actually kind of in on this card. I think this one's very neat. I like this one more than the last one quite a bit. Osgir, the Reconstructor. Like that sounds like a transformer. Reconstructor. 2 colorless, red, white. Also legendary creature, giant artificer. See, this is a giant. Pay 1, sacrifice an artifact. Target creature you control gets +2/+0 to end your turn. Neat. You don't have to tap it, which is another thing to notice about this card, which is very good. And then you have pay X and tap this. Exile an artifact card with mana value X from your graveyard. Create 2 tokens that are a copy of the exiled card. Activate this only as a sorcery. This is also cool. I mean, I like what's going on here, right? It's vigilance, so you can attack with it, still use its abilities later in the turn, though you do have to do those as a sorcery. Nothing wrong with that. You can pump the rest of your team by reusing artifacts, which is cool. You can sacrifice artifacts to put them in the graveyard, and on the same turn even, actually, right? So you could pay 1, sacrifice an artifact that has, say, like a 3 cost, right? Pump something +2/+0. Then you could pay 3 more, get it out of the graveyard, exile it, and get 2 copies into play. So you're locked and loaded for next turn. So I like that this card's doing a lot. Like this fits into just aggro themes. It fit into just random decks that play a lot of like I guess you want to say just a lot of mana rocks. It fits into equipment decks. Like this is doing a lot of work. I like this card. This card's really good. All right, Breena, the Demagogue. 1 colorless, white black, bird warlock, legendary creature, mythic rare, flying, 1/3. When a player attacks one of your opponents, if that player has more life than another of your opponents, that attacking player draws a card and you put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature. That is okay. So player A, that's not you, attacks player B. But if player B has more life than any of the other players, then player A gets to draw a card and you get to put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control. This card is probably better than I think it is, but I'm probably out on this one. I don't get it. I don't and I don't know. Like if you found a way to work this into some type of group hug deck, I guess, because you're giving life and then you can kind of be friendly and people want to keep you alive because them attacking is helping them get cards and that's also growing your creatures. So I guess that's fine. But yeah, not if you're into that, that's a card for that. I'd be interesting to see what other cards get included in that deck to see how it works for people. This one, we have some twins on a card, it looks like. Shadrix and Nev, Twincasters. 2 colorless, green blue, Merfolk Wizards, legendary creature, mythic rare, ward 2, which looks like the new thing that if something would target this creature, they have to pay 2. If 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many tokens are created instead. Yeah, people will play this card. I mean, there's not a lot to say. Like if you play things that make tokens and you're playing blue and green, sure. You toss it in there, you have a chance to double up your things. I'm totally good with that. That's a fine card. Okay, let's see what we got here. This is a double face planeswalker, so we have Will on one side, Rowan on the other. This is peculiar. All right, so I guess Rowan is the front and Will is the back. Not that I guess it matters greatly. Scholar of Sparks. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. All right, like that's already a good start. For only 3 mana, you get a 2 loyalty planeswalker. Rowan Scholar of Sparks deals 1 damage to each opponent. If you've drawn 3 or more cards this turn, she deals 3 damage to each opponent instead. So that's kind of cool, right? Like I can go for that. Like it's 1 damage, go up to 3 loyalty, get to do more damage if you've drawn more cards. Then -4, you get an emblem with whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may pay 2. If you do, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for that copy. All right, so just talking about Rowan for a second, that's actually a really strong ability. If you can keep her alive or create a situation where your opponent doesn't want to attack, your instants and sorceries getting to cost 1 less is actually really good. Really good card. +1 to just deal a damage is okay, but if you have a way to, say on turn 4, or whatever the turn is after you play this, end up drawing 3, then you get to do extra damage for the 1, and it becomes like a real deal, because you're talking about being able to play a 4 mana spell on turn, or 5 mana spell on turn 4, which that's where you can get some of those things that let you draw extra cards. So this is actually kind of sweet. There's a lot going on with this. The backside, Will, Scholar of Frost. Instant and sorcery spells cost 1 less to cast, so they have the same thing. This has 3 abilities though, +1, up to 1 target creature has base power. Oh, it costs 4 or 5, by the way, for 4 loyalty. Up to 1 target creature has base power and toughness 0-2 until your next turn. All right, so that's good. It can protect itself, turn a creature into an 0-2 for a turn. I can dig that. -3, draw 2 cards. All right, just straight up draw 2. Or -7, exile up to 5 target permanents. For each permanent exiled this way, its controller creates a 4/4 red and blue elemental creature token. Not a huge fan of the ultimate, but you can use it on your own stuff because it doesn't say opponent's permanents; it just says target permanent. So that's actually pretty sweet. Don't hate it. The draw 3 is a little but there are a lot of things, or draw 2, sorry, -3. So there are a few things that you pay 4 or 5 and draw 2 cards. So it's not that unreal. But I mean, I guess in a pinch, if you just needed cards late, it is a thing that could draw you cards. I do like the first ability. These cards do actually work decently well in tandem, which is also good. So, yeah, I think this is a neat card. Like, how much do I expect it to see play? I don't know. It feels a little gimmicky. Like, you kind of have to really focus to build around them. So, I'm not sure, how I really feel about that. But it's cool. I can get behind this. Reducing spells as a whole are okay. I don't know. The problem is this is a card that like I kind of have to envision the rest of the deck that would play this. Like just getting value for my cards doesn't mean anything because you have to tell me what's the payoff, right? That's kind of the issue a lot of the Is It Spells decks have is like, okay, you have all these things to draw cards and put stuff in your yard or whatever. But then a lot of times you have whatever is the experimental explosion or whatever. Like that's your payoff. And then if that dies or doesn't do anything, you just lose. You know what I mean? So it's not like you can do a lot of cool things, but I think I have to see what the payoff is that these decks build in to really make this card worthwhile. But I could see Will being played more than Rowan, higher loyalty. But I mean, if you put it in a deck where you get the option on both sides, I don't hate it. It's pretty cool. Dragon's Guard Elite. 1 colorless, 1 green for 2/2. Rare, human wizard, or human druid, sorry. Magecraft, whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Pay 6, 4 green, to double the number of counters on it. I'm okay with this card. As far as power level, I think it's okay. And one thing that's neat, it's a 2/2 for 2 that gets the +1/+1s. Usually when you have this type of card, they're 1/1s. So I do like the fact that this is a bit bigger and more versatile. Paying 6 to double the counters seems but if you have nothing else to do with your mana, I guess it's okay. Does this go into an aggro type deck? Does it go into like a +1/+1 counters deck? More likely. That's probably true. We have Archmage Emeritus, 2 colorless, blue, 2/2. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. This card just kind of makes me sad. Not gonna lie. This card's gonna be annoying to play against. Or Eager First Year. Okay, that's a weird name, but I get what you're saying. 1 colorless, 1 white, human wizard. See, we have all these other wizards. There's no reason for the other things to have to be shamans. I'm gonna harp on that probably this whole time. It's a 2/2. Whenever you cast or copy instant or sorcery, it gets +1/+0. Meh, it's fine. It's just like weaker prowess. Professor of Symbology. 1 colorless, 1 white, 2/1. When Professor Symbology enters the battlefield, learn. You may reveal a lesson card you own from outside the game and put it into your hand or discard a card to draw a card. Okay, a couple of things. On this card. The first thing is, what are learn spells? Do they have a particular thing, whatever? 2, do learn spells just live in your sideboard, or are we making a new weird, like Yu-Gi-Oh style side deck? Or do we have some learn spells that do like the foretell thing and exile themselves for some reason, and then you can get them back? Those questions I think I'd have to have answered before I say how good or bad this is. However, it is a 2/1 for 2 that does automatically give you extra card advantage. So worst case scenario, you just get a card right back, which I don't hate that. So yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're just trying to force the learn mechanics, so this makes sense. Blue's gonna have a card that draws a card and gets another card. This is basically pay 3, draw 2, but one of them is a card you select. So create 2, or this is pest summoning, 1 colorless, 2 Golgari mana. Create 2 1/1 black and green pest creature tokens with when this creature dies, you gain life. I don't know, this seems fine. I mean, I think, you know, if you're playing something that wants to make tokens, this is pretty cool. Then you get to double up the number of tokens you're making, and you'll get all that life when they die. So I don't hate that. Like, that's okay. It's a sorcery, which is kind of meh. Confront the past. Looks like Liliana staring into a mirror, like watching Gideon die, saving her. I think is what they're trying to depict there. And it's like evil Liliana, and her as Professor Onyx is not happy seeing her reflection. So it's kind of cool artwork, really, to try to tell the story of the card. I dig that. So Confront the Past is X and black. It is also a lesson. Return target Planeswalker card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, or remove twice X loyalty counters from a Planeswalker and opponent control. This card feels kind of narrow, unless they expect us to be playing with a lot of Planeswalkers. I mean, I don't even know if I'd say even a third of the matches I play right now involve Planeswalkers. And even then, even if I want to get the ones I want back, I'd be paying like 7 mana to get back Big Garrick or something, or even the new Liliana. So like I don't know. I feel like if the meta dictates this card is playable, it'll probably be very good. This is Lorehold Apprentice. It's a red and a white human cleric, uncommon, 2/2. Whenever you cast or copy an instant sorcery spell until end of turn, spirit creatures you control gain. This creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. Very specific that it says spirit creatures. Well, it does work with that white card that's been coming up in a lot of decks that whenever you play a spell, your second spell, you make a 1/1 spirit. So that's fine. There's not a ton of quality spirits unless you're going to be some in this set. Yeah, I think it's reasonable. But the Magecraft part doesn't have a big upside unless you just have a lot of other things that are spirits. A red and a blue for a 2/2 human shaman creature. Also uncommon. Whenever you cast an instant or cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, Prismari Apprentice can't be blocked this turn if that spell's mana value was 5 or greater, but a +1/+1 counter on Prismari Apprentice. I like this one even less. Mostly because, one, you're not often playing that many spells that cost 5 or more, so they have to be very particular things. And you're only getting a singular +1/+1 counter for playing 5 mana. Stormkiln Artist. 3 colorless and a red dwarf shaman. Hey, we get some dwarves. All right. A 2/2. Stormkill Artist gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, but it fully supports what we started doing in previous sets with Magda and whatnot, where you're like, okay, dwarves tap, dwarves make treasure, the treasure make this thing bigger because artifacts matter. So now I have at least 2 cards that work together doing things together. And, you know, people are still trying to make GAD work, but we're still struggling with that. But I this is what I'm saying. Like, this card doesn't hurt anything, still fits the flavor of the set. It is a 4 mana 2/2, so it's not great, obviously. It's fit what you were doing with the cards from the last set, especially rares. So people who are interested in that or want to build around that at least get some cool tools here. Quandrix Apprentice, a blue or green 2/2 human wizard, uncommon. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a land from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any. That's fine. I mean, like, I mean, I'm not sure how badly you're just gonna need to keep getting lands. At some point, you're gonna want those spells instead of land. Yeah, Growth Spiral, where you can just like, cool, get a thing. But like playing something like Growth Spiral alongside this is kind of cool. But do I really want this and Growth Spiral in the same deck? Right? Growth Spiral decks don't like. I want to be playing Growth Spiral on 2, not this on 2. Witherbloom Apprentice. I almost said Witherbroom. Black green 2/2 human druid. By the way, lots of humans so far in this set. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, each opponent loses 1 life, you gain 1 life. Yeah, this one makes sense. This is quick, it's simple, I could be draining you, playing discard spells, whatever, still gaining life while you're losing life. Quality 2/2 for 2 in a lot of the aggro decks, which is fine. Yeah, I think this works. This can fit in a few different decks. I'm okay with this. So we have our new rare lands. We did get to see these. They are similar to the check lands in the sense that the others checked when they came into play. These, however, as it enters the battlefield, you may reveal an island or mountain card from your hand. If you don't, it enters the battlefield tapped. So these will come in tapped, give you mana of either color, unless you have one already or a appropriate land in hand you can reveal, and then it comes into play untapped. I think these are good. These are fine, especially if you're playing some like 3-color deck that's already using triomes and stuff, because the triomes count as 3 different land types. So I could be sold on these being solid cards. I have no problem with this. All right, so we got first day of class. 1 colorless, 1 red. Battlefield under your control this turn. Put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it gains haste until end of turn. And learn. I don't know where this card goes, but I feel like if it finds the home, it's going to be really good. Like, imagine if this card was able to exist when we had, let's say, 2 rotations ago, when we had the Drake deck, right? The red-blue decks that had the 2 different Drakes that whenever they, for the number of spells you have in the yard, they get that much power. This could have been cool, right? Where you could have been like, play this, boom, play one of those Drakes. They're probably going to be like +9 or whatever on the front side. Then they get a +1/+1 counter, and you get to attack with it. Like, and this going to the graveyard pumps those. Like, this type of card would be great for that. So if we get something in those lines, could be really good. Okay, Expanded Anatomy. Not necessarily the best name, but hey, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. It gains vigilance until end of turn. Cool that this card's colorless. I wouldn't expected this to be a card we would make that's just colorless, but put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. I like that. It goes into the +1/+1 token decks very well, being able to split 2 counters and possibly double those up. Gives the creature vigilance for the turn, which is also nice. It itself is a lesson that you can go search for, so I like that. Like, this card has a lot. It does cost 3, so that is the downside. It's 3 colorless. Waterfall Aerialist. Huh. Really cool art. 3 colorless and a blue. 3/1 flying ward 2, which is if somebody targets it with anything, they have to pay 2. Kind of a simple card, but I think it's fine. I don't think it's necessarily constructed playable, but this thing will be a big nuisance in limited, right? If you don't have a flyer, this is going to be very difficult to get rid of. So, totally on board. Like I said, this art is sweet. This is art that would make a sweet deck box or poster or something, or having on a playmat. I don't know what Ultra Pro's doing yet, but I think that could be awesome if they are. But yeah, and it's a Djinn. I think this might be one of the smallest Djinns we've seen to date at a 3/1. Because well, that's not true. We had the red blue Affliate that you flipped a coin out of Visions. And I think that was also a 3/1. So Plarg, Dean of Chaos. Okay. We've got a 1 colorless and a red, 2/2. Discard a card, draw a card. All right, that's a typical thing we get in red. It's an Orc Shaman, rare. Pay 5, 4 colorless and a red. Ooh, and tap it. Reveal cards from top of your library until you reveal a non-legendary, non-land card with mana value 3 or less. You may cast that card without paying its cost. Put all revealed cards not cast this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. Whew, how do I feel about this? This lets you use the ability and you can just play it without paying the cost. You can pay anything that's 3. You pay 5. Man, 5 is so much to tap. But it is a very strong ability. If you only have, say, like removal cards or something, you're guaranteed to hit one. Oof. 2/2 for 2, I don't hate. The discard and draw, the looting ability, I think is fine. This one's hard to judge. I don't know. The other half, Augusta, Dean of Order. 2 colorless and a red. Human Cleric rare, 1/3. Other tapped creatures you control get +1/+0. Other untapped creatures you control get +0/+1. Whenever you attack untap each creature you control, then tap any number of creatures you control. Wait. So whenever you attack, oh no, you untap each. No, you untap each creature. Then you tap any number of creatures. So you could untap stuff that you use to play like mana, and then tap them again just so they would. Okay? Like this is okay. So whenever I attack, let's say I attack with 3 things, and I have like I don't know 2 other things that were already tapped for something else. Then when I attack with those 3, I untap each creature I control. So everything will say all 6 creatures are untapped. Then I can tap any number of creatures I want to. So I could re-tap the ones that were attacking so they could get +1/+0, but they would have had that anyway. Yeah, so this is really just trying to combo with other things. Like if you have other things that were already tapped for mana or were searching or doing other stuff, then it's cool. Obviously, if you have a Plarg out, you could reuse Plarg, if you had the mana, so that would be a thing. Makes their good blocks bad and your bad attackers good. Like sort of, it does. Like you can leave your attackers untapped to get +1 toughness, but that's not often a thing you're going to want to do if you're being the aggressor or you've built an aggressive deck. I mean, it does help a few of them live, but I mean, it's a weird card, man. I don't. Yeah, I mean, it's a 3 mana 1/3, which isn't great. Yeah, what's funny is I think the problem is the first 2 lines of getting the bonuses are doing something different than the rest of the card text is. Right? The bottom card text is kind of like trying to reuse cards, get some mana, draw extra spells, combo-y things or whatever. The first 2 are just like, hey, here's ways for me to be more aggressive and or protect my creatures. Like so it's kind of a weird mix of abilities. The good news is like it can fit into 2 different decks, which is kind of neat. So I like that. That is not really like, okay, you can only really use it if you're playing this type of deck. Like it does fit a couple different things, but not really something that's feels overly useful, I guess. I'd rather this be in a mid-range shell as opposed to an aggro shell. Maybe, but even then, I'd probably just want different cards. That's my problem. Like, I can play it in a mid-range shell, but would I even play it? You know what I mean? Because the backside's not really that strong to play in those decks, or the front side, I guess, with Plarg. The backside being a 1/3 can block a couple things, but what am I getting out of those other abilities? So I'm sure somebody else will figure out something awesome to do with this card, but I don't think it's going to be me. I think looking at these both sides, I'm kind of like, I'm more excited about the red side than the white side, being completely honest. But even then, 5 is a lot to pay to get that ability, and I feel like I would have to build around this card's ability to not get stuck with something I don't necessarily want, right? You might pay 5 and I don't know, you get to draw a card and you're like, well, I was hoping to kill a thing. Now I might die, that sort of thing. But again, if you have Plarg with Augusta, if you have both halves out, then you can tap and basically loot a couple times or find another thing. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I say this, Plarg at least does let you find. It just says non-legendary, non-land. So you could find some creatures you could play too, and that's not awful. Torrent Sculptor. 2 colorless, blue, 2/2. Creature, Merfolk Wizard, rare, ward 2. When Torrent Sculptor enters the battlefield, exile an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard. Put a number of +1/+1 counters on Torrent Sculptor equal to half that card's mana value rounded up. Well, that's cool. Since it's rounded up, you're always going to get at least 1, even if you just have like 1 mana spells in the yard. So that's kind of neat. It's a hard card to kill. You can only exile instants and sorceries, though. So I'm not sure. Like, what's the largest, like, instant or sorcery most people have been playing with lately, though? Like a 3 mana or 4 mana? So you're likely to have this be like a 4/4 for 4 that's hard to kill. It is a Merfolk, which is neat. We haven't had some Merfolk in a minute. But that's a lot. That's a lot to pay for a very variable ability. Though, I mean, I guess if you have like an ultimatum in the graveyard, you can get +4. That's kind of sweet. I mean, that's the thing you can do. Play a 4-mana 6/6. But actually, it's a 4-mana 6/6 with Ward, which I think is pretty cool. So maybe something, I don't know. But the problem is you just have better things you can go get with your ultimatums almost always. So I don't know. Let's see what the backside says. Flamethrower Sonata. It's a sorcery, colorless and a red. Discard a card, then draw a card. When you discard an instant or sorcery card this way, this card deals damage equal to that card's mana value to target creature or planeswalker you don't control. Hey, Oliver. This is again okay. I think this is one of those ones where we start talking about where do those is it spell decks start to find some pieces. This could work in there, right? Where you play this, you discard a thing, you deal damage to a creature so you can buy yourself some time. You end up getting to draw a card, so it replaces itself. It could be damage to a planeswalker, so that's also nice. I don't mind this card. I think I like the flamethrower side better than the front side, but they do work in tandem, right? If you have discarded some things, you get the chance to play the Torrent Sculptor later in the game. Maybe you don't have anything big to discard, or you just need a blocker. So I'm good with this. I don't have a problem with this. This is nice. This is nice. I think you can do a lot of things with both these cards in tandem. Yeah, I'm good with this. Pitching a Seagate Restoration is nice, but it also only deals damage to a creature or planeswalker. So, I mean, not that that's bad, but I do like what's going on here. This is pretty neat. And the fact that in tandem, assuming you're playing 4 of, the Torrent Sculptor can come out and just take advantage of what you discarded earlier to maybe deal damage to something. So I think that part makes it appealing. Like, it's weird because if you look at either of these cards like on their own merit, you're kind of like, okay, I'll just play the red side. But when you consider the fact that if you play 4 copies, you get the Flamethrower as the card you want. You get the Torrent Sculptor for free later in the game, just as a bonus for playing those. So I'm pretty into that. I'm pretty into that. It's funny because I think if I had to just find room in the deck for the Torrent Sculptor, I wouldn't like it. But because I don't have to find room for it, I really just have to be finding room for the Flamethrower, and I get the Torrent Sculptor as an upside, I actually really like that a lot better. So, I mean, again, discard something, costs 3 or 4 even, kill a thing early, then maybe on turn 6, 7, 8, 9, you draw the other Torrent Sculptor, and you're like, cool, I'll play it, and I'll get a 4/4 or a 5/5, right? Like, that actually seems pretty good. I'm all right with that. It's not. I don't think the Torrent Sculptor is great, but I think this is a good example of design for a double face card, where top decking a Flamethrower on turn, I don't know, 12 is not going to feel great. But if you can turn that into a, we'll say at least a 4/4, if not a 5/5 or a 6/6, then it feels really good. So it's almost like you just got free cards in your deck that you didn't really have to worry about, and they're both useful. So yeah, I'm in on it. I talked myself into that card. So yeah. What do we got here? We've got more double face cards. Uvelda, Dean of Perfection, which is a Djinn that's a... Wait, they have a Djinn that's a professor? Well, a Dean, not even a professor. Like, that seems problematic anywhere. Like, why? Why would you... Saying Doomscar into Torrent Sculptor. My problem there is you would be playing a deck that would want double blue and double white and red at some point, which would be a little bit of a problem for me. Though, I mean, the problem is you can do that in a Jeskai deck, but the Jeskai decks probably don't need that. I mean, I think Jeskai decks already have better choices because you can just do that with, what's her name? The Planeswalker. So, I wouldn't... Yeah, I don't know. I think you can just play the Planeswalker and get a better option of the ability and still have more stuff. You don't necessarily need to go out that way. All right. Mike says it's their artsy department. It's fine. I don't know, man. Djinns are questionable. So we'll see what these cards are about. 2 colorless and a blue. 2/2. Legendary creature. Djinn wizard. You can tap this card and then you exile an instant or sorcery card from your hand. Put 3 counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, if that card stays exiled, you can remove a counter. And when the last one's removed, you can cast it. Oh, you can cast it, but it costs 4 less to cast. Okay, that's fine. That's a long time to wait, though. But sure. No, that it's a long time to wait, and you still may not get the card because yeah, yeah. I don't know about this. Yeah, exactly. It's like bad suspend. I don't know. And then the backside is Nasari, Dean of Expression. 3 colorless, red, 4/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of each opponent's library. Until end of turn, you may cast spells from among those exiled cards, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. Okay. Whenever you cast a spell from exile, put a +1/+1 counter on the Dean. So the beginning of your upkeep, you can exile a card, and then it says until end of turn, you may cast spells from among those cards. So they stay exiled, and you get the choice of getting to cast those. But you still have to pay for it, so it's not free. But then whenever you play a card, wait, whenever you cast a spell from exile, so it's not even any of those, it's just any spell that's been exiled, you can put a +1/+1 counter on it. See, I think this is another case, kind of like the last one we talked about, where this is the red side is reasonable. I don't know if the deck particularly wants that because again, you have to consider it at 5 mana. What else could you be doing with 5 mana? You know, uh, it kind of likes adventure and foretell cards, but like again, do we care? Right? Like at 5 mana, do you want this or do you want Terror of the Peaks? You know what I'm saying? Like there are some times you're going to want this, but like there's just better cards we could be casting for 5 mana, I think is the problem. So that's kind of the problem I have. Like the upside of getting to get a card from the opponent and play it is cool. So I don't hate that at all. But I'm kind of having a hard time wrapping my head around like what decks do I want that want to rely on that mechanic or rely on this card as my 5 mana card? Because right now, if you pay 5 mana, like you have to be bringing it, you know? I mean, that's a lot to maybe get an upside from this card. Even when you're talking about the adventure decks, like they're already trying to get to play like I guess their giants, their ultimatums, the new dragon, the Goldspan dragon, you know, they'd rather play that. Because again, you play Goldspan dragon, you attack, you have 2 mana, now you can cast those adventures. So though adventures do work with Nasari, I don't know if it goes in those decks, I think is the problem. I'm having a hard time with this one. The suspend thing is kind of neat. I like where that card's going. I like the interesting design. It almost even makes sense with like the character of like it's trying to make a thing perfect, so it takes more time, you know, like that sort of thing. I can be talked into all that. But just as cards, eh, I mean, it's a 3 mana 2/2. It has to live a turn before I can even tuck a card away. Do I even want that card in 3 turns? You know what I mean? Like, would I want it before then? Lots of questions. Lots of questions. I don't. Man, I want to be higher on these cards, but I don't think I can be. I want to be higher. I don't think I can. Now yeah, that's true. Commander cards, these can be playable. I will say that. Like nothing wrong with that. Because there are times, and I will say that for Commander, right? There's times with you've like say Uvalda, right, where you get to put the time counters on it or whatever we call them, hone counters. there's a lot of spells that cost 6, 7, 8, or whatever that you're playing. That, okay, cool, I'll tuck this aside till later. And then you get to cast it for like 2 mana, right? That I can get behind. Same thing on Nasari. In Commander, since I only get one of everything, getting a card off my opponent's library could be huge. Valentin, Dean of the Vein. 1 black, 1/1, Vampire Warlocks. There's a vampire for those of you that want one. Menace Lifelink. All right, those are cool words. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. If you do, you can pay 2. And if you do pay 2, create a 1/1 black and green pest creature token. And when this creature dies, okay, so making pest tokens is actually just a thing in the set. All right, so that's neat. I could be into this card a little bit. I mean, it doesn't fit any particular themes, but it is a useful card. Just every time something dies, you can pay 2, get a 1/1, and then when that dies, you get to gain some life. So yeah, and it does have lifelink on its own. It has menace, so I mean, it's gonna be hard to block if you pump it or do other things. So yeah, I'm okay with it. I'm not overjoyed about it, but it's at least playable. Lisette, Dean of the Root, 2 colorless, green, 4/4, legendary creature, human druid. Whenever you gain life, you may pay 1. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control, and those creatures gain trample. Oh, hold up. This card might be for real. Because I was reading that as for a second as it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, but this actually just says straight up, if you gain life, you get to put a +1/+1 on everything. And they already had the stuff from Commander Legends that, if you gain life, you get to put counters on things, those unicorns. So, like, that's already a thing you can do. This actually has some room in Standard because there are a fair amount of things that do gain some life. You also have the +1/+1 counters deck that's still a thing. Now, I don't know if this fits in there because it says 4 mana and they try to be on the low mana side. But being able to just put counters on your entire team and you get trample, which is one of the things those decks suffer with because sometimes they can't punch through that little bit of damage at the end because everything gets blocked up. Even though you have huge creatures, you need to give them trample. Like, hey, Sims, like this could work really well there. And again, this is a type of card where because you have both sides, they actually do work well with each other. Like even if you just sent in Valentin on a suicide run, you could pay 1 and then just your whole team gets counters. Or if something else had died somewhere along the way and you set up a couple of those +1/+1 pests, well then you just start attacking with your pests because if they don't block them, they take damage. If they do, you get to pump the rest of your team, and that's pretty sweet. So as far as front and backside that work well together, I'm kind of digging these cards. Kianne, Dean of Substance, 2 colorless and a green, elf druid, who looks like pretty much general school marm, like with their hair done up. Tap and exile the top card of your library. If it's a land, put it into your hand. Otherwise, put a study counter on the card. Okay. Pay 4 and a green. Creature, create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token. So the second time we've seen fractal creatures reference. Put a +1/+1 counter on it for each different mana value among non-land cards you own and exile with study counters on them. Oh my god, that is so many words. Okay. So you can tap it, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land, it goes into your hand. If not, you set it aside, you put a study counter on it. Then you can pay for and create a token that gets the number of counters on it for each different mana value among the cards exiled. So, yeah, this I don't like because it's very random, right? One, you're looking at your top card, you might lose a spell if it's not a land because it goes away and you don't really have a way to cast it currently. Though, if they're lessons, I guess technically if you have cards that let you get lessons from exile or from outside the game and put them in your hand, then like, I don't know, maybe that's the thing. But realistically, you're setting cards aside that you're not going to get to cast. And then at some point down the road, you can pay 5 and hope that you have some reasonable number of cards with different casting costs or mana cost, now we refer to it as, outside the game. Like, that's a lot. Like, you have to hope for things to go right. And, like, otherwise, this is just a 3 mana 2/2 that you might get a land off the top of your library. Like, I'm not feeling it. Maybe the backside can convince me. That's happened a couple times today. So, Imbraham, not Abraham, Imbraham, Dean of Theory, 2 colorless, blue. Hey, thanks for liking the stream. It's a 3/3 bird wizard, flying, pay X blue, tap it, exile the top X cards of your library, and put a study counter on each of them. Then you may put a card you own in exile with the study counter on it into your hand. So you could pay like 4 and 2 blue, put 4 cards from the top of your library to the side. They're marked with the study counter, and then you put one of them into your hand. So you kind of are just getting to scry the top cards and put the best one into your hand. I don't think that's bad at all. 4 mana 3/3. You have to wait a turn to get that ability. I mean, that's okay. I don't know. Like, would you rather have this or something like Gadwick in your deck? You know what I mean? I think that's part of the problem too. They do kind of sort of work well together, but I think my problem with Kianne is that it's like a lot of times you may just be getting like 3/3s for 5 mana or something, which is reasonable. You can pay 2 blue and get the card you already have counters on it. That's true. If you like you'll play 2 blue and you'll get 2 cards set aside. You'll get one of those anyway, right? Yeah, you can pay 2 blue and X, and if you put something already, but again, you have to have Kianne and Imbraham, and Kianne's also very small. It's gonna die to like everything. A 3 mana, like, man, I kind of like what these cards are doing, but it feels like a lot of work. This starts to feel to me like Kasima, where you were okay. We're gonna play a land, and like, do we put a counter on Kasima or not? Okay, we do. The next time we play a land, do we want to get the card or not? Okay, cool. Let's go and let her come in, and let's get cards. Like it's. So we have Shale, Dean of Radiance, 1 colorless and a white 1/1 flying vigilance bird cleric. Put a +1/+1 creature or +1/+1 counter on each creature that entered the battlefield under your control this turn. I'm all right with this part. Like, that's a reasonable creature. It's a 1/1 vigilance flyer, and every turn you can attack and then tap it and just put a +1/+1 on things that came into play. That's reasonable. I don't know if I'd say it's good, but this is reasonable. I am totally accepting of this card. I could see playing that in some builds. And it's also a bird. It's a flyer, so it fits some of those like Azorius flyer type themes. So I'm okay with that. Embrose, Dean of Shadow, 2 colorless, black, 4/4. Put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature. Then Embrose, Dean of Shadows deals 2 damage to that creature. Wait, so you put a +1/+1 counter on a different creature, then Dean smacks it for 2. All right, fair enough. Whenever a creature you control with the +1/+1 counter on it dies, you draw a card. What is this Dean? Is he like some weird like? Well, like what is I want? This is a character I want story background on. Like, what is this thing trying to do? So it's a 4 mana 4/4. It doesn't have to be used as a sorcery, which is also good. But like, you can tap it, put a counter on something, then try to kill it. So if it's a 1/1, it still dies because you're putting a +1/+1 counter and then dealing 2, right? But then randomly, I guess if your opponent targets one of your things, you could also give it a bonus and then it would die and you would get a card. So that's actually okay. Man, this card's weird. I don't know how I feel about it. Like, on the surface, I don't hate it though. It's a 4/4 for 4. We've already seen some other green and black things that care about having some +1/+1 counters. I think we've seen the +1/+1 counters decks try to splash black for the ability to play like Pulokranos and play the 3 mana one that's a 3/3. Whenever it dies, you get a replacement that has equal to a number of counters. So it's possible you can try to go a different route with those decks and maybe just make them green black now and take advantage of some +1/+1 counters. Like that could be a thing. Grakmaw, that's the other card I was thinking of. But yeah, in those scenarios, then if your opponent's just killing your stuff, then you're just getting cards every time something dies. And like I could be sold on that. But I mean, you could also just splash white just because you get the option of playing shell and getting to put free counters on things. So I don't know. Like this is all right. Like both sides I could find homes for. I could find reasons to play both. Either we want to build +1/+1 counters on either direction. If you want to play shell, actually, Michael, you wouldn't want to play it with Seralf realistically because, well, I guess you could. You just never want to activate your Seralf because you kill all your own things. That's not really where you want to be. Also, it exiles when it uses its ability, so you wouldn't get anything for your creatures dying because it says creature die. The definition of die has to leave the battlefield and go to the graveyard. So if it exiles, you don't get much. And by much, I mean 0. But yeah, Shell also is a cleric, so it can fit into the cleric decks. It can go into the white weenie kind of like aggro decks we've been seeing. It could fit there. Like I said, the Azorius Flyers decks might want it. The +1/+1 counter decks want it. So this is a good versatile card. It fits into a lot of things. I could be talked into the first half. The Imbros, I think, is more specific, has to be more built around to really utilize the ability, but I don't necessarily hate it. I think it could still be a good quality card overall. And honestly, if nothing else, it just pumps your creatures, right? If you're at this weird stalemate, like, okay, end of your turn, I'm going to put a counter on this thing. Sure, it takes 2 damage. Would you like to try to kill it? I'm going to get a card, you know? I'm not saying use it on your opponent's stuff. I'm saying use it on your stuff. But, I mean, you can use it on enemy creatures, I guess. But you only get the bonus on stuff from stuff you control. So that's the big thing. But it says supposed to put 1 counter on another creature, and then it deals 2 damage to it. So technically, you can pick off 1/1s on your opponent's side of the field. So yeah, the card has some uses. I'm about it. I'm good with this. I can be talked into this card, and I probably will play this card where both versions I will want in decks for various reasons. So yeah, I'm good with that. Yeah, this I'm about. Introduction to Prophecy. That is such a I don't know, we should be teaching this in school type thing. You know, we should be keeping our curriculum separate. But 3 colorless, actually, which is weird because I guess it is a colorless card. It sort of looked like a white card for a second, but it is a colorless card. So 3 colorless, it's a lesson. Scry 2, then draw a card. It's fine. It's a common. Shadrix, Silver Quill, 3 colorless, white and black, legendary creature, Elder Dragon. Actually, the cheapest of the Elder Dragons, actually, to date, right? At 5 mana. It's only a 2/5. Does have flying and double strike, though. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you can choose 2. Each mode must target a different player. So this is also going to be good for a commander. Target player creates a 2/1 black-white Inkling creature token with flying. Target player draws a card and loses a life. Target player puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature they control. Okay, remember I was talking about putting an upgraded +1/+1 counters deck? Here's your top end. Like, now the last card we were just talking about, you definitely want to play that in the deck. You almost don't even need green cards anymore, unless you really just want to splash green to play like Grakmaw and I guess the 2/2 Centaur or whatever that pumps your team. And not only that, it has a lot of words, but they are very clean and very easy to format on this card, right? It's not confusing. You can tell exactly what it does. I like so much about this card. Even the artwork's kind of creepy cool. You know, so I'm good with this. Yeah. This is cool. I mean, you do have to choose, right? Your opponent gets one, you get one. So you can't get both things. But, I mean, I like the idea that because you have to give something to your opponent, it is balanced. If I want a 3, just pumping the rest of your team when you play this, and you're like, okay, great, you get a 2/1. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, that seems more than reasonable. But it is interesting that it is choose 2, right? You can't only get 1 and pass. And imagine for Commander what this card does, right? Like, you like playing politics. This card's gonna really let you do that. Because you might even be like, hey, look, you've got all those 1/1 saprolings or whatever. What if I gave them all 1/1s, but made sure you're attacking this other person? You know what I mean? Like, that could be very cool. This one costs 5, though. Exile target non-land permanent. Its controller draws a card. Sorcery speed, but that's pretty good. I mean, just 5 mana, any color. I mean, any deck can have this if you just need some type of removal, which is kind of neat. Works for Planeswalkers, works for enchantments. Like this is a pretty sneaky common. I mean, really, I'm sitting here thinking about it and going like, you know, think about how many times you've been playing, say, like red, and you don't have a way to get rid of a problematic enchantment, right? Or maybe as a sideboard card to help you out with some things. Because think about like the ultimatum decks, knowing that they could safely go get like Cure Best the Sea God, and you're not going to have an answer. But like this is a thing you could do, right? For something like green that may not have a good way to deal with the planeswalker. This is a thing you can play. Like you give your opponent a card, but I don't have a problem with that. Like I think in the times you would want to play this, you're going to really want to play it. You know what I mean? So like you're gonna like giving up that card is gonna be worth it to get rid of a thing your deck can't normally get rid of. Because if you're playing black, like you have enough answers now. You're not going to worry about it. If you're playing white, you're probably not going to worry about playing this card. But red, green, and blue, they might consider playing this. Lots of cool cards, though, I will say. Like, and so far, I don't see anything that looks ridiculous, right? Nothing that's just insane.